Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. The number of new COVID-19 cases globally is continuing to spike, driven almost exclusively now by the highly transmissible Omicron strain.
Thankfully, it is less serious than previous variants, but it's still putting extra strain on healthcare systems around the world, including here in South Korea. For more at where we stand globally in regards to the pandemic, we're joined by Ben Cowling, Chair Professor of Epidemiology at the University of Hong Kong. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
So since the last time we spoke, South Korea is now experiencing a rapid uptick in the number of new infections, especially Omicron. For our viewers who might feel under the weather, what symptoms should we look out for, and what are the best practices if you feel like you have it?
Well, Omicron tends to be milder than previous variants of COVID. It's particularly mild in people who've been vaccinated or people who've previously had other COVID infections. The presentation is often like a mild cold, a stuffy nose, feeling a bit under the weather. And because it's so similar to the symptoms of other viral common colds, it's really valuable if you can get tested, really valuable if you can go to get a test, either a rapid test at home or do a PCR test. Because if you know it's COVID, you can follow the regulations, you can isolate at home, etc. And if it's not COVID, that's good news for you. I mean, it's not good that you've got a cold, but it's maybe good that it's not COVID. So it's difficult to distinguish based just on symptoms, whether it's COVID or just another common cold infection.
Now, there are numerous reports of people getting reinfected with Omicron after already having it. Firstly, a two-pronged question. Is that something you are aware of? And in general, if someone is reinfected with COVID-19, regardless of the strain, is it generally milder, as it's something our immune system is better able to deal with?
Well, for the first question, there's a number of different strains of Omicron going round. There's the BA1, which came in first, and then the BA2, which is sometimes called stealth Omicron, because in a PCR test, it looks slightly different. And I think it's possible to get both of those if you're really unlucky. But in general, within a short space of time, it's very unusual to have COVID twice. We know that in the longer term, immunity after an infection won't last forever. It should last for months, maybe even a year or longer, but it won't last forever. And so many people who are getting COVID now already had it once, maybe a year or 2 years ago. But if you get Omicron now, I think you won't get COVID again for a period of time. And if you do get COVID again, most likely it won't be Omicron. It'll be whatever comes next, another variant maybe.
Right. Well, Professor, South Korea is also talking about giving a fourth shot to some senior people, but it seems like efforts to, even boost the booster shot campaign is continuing. So aside from booster shots, should governments consider other options? And if so, which options could you recommend?
Well, I think Israel looked at fourth doses and found that actually it didn't help that much. Third doses, we know, make a big difference. Having another dose or fourth dose doesn't help that much. And in terms of vaccination strategies, it's probably more important to still focus on first dose, second dose, and third doses. So I don't think too many places will do fourth doses. I know in Korea you have antiviral drugs available, and that's fantastic. If those can be given to people at higher risk of developing severe COVID, if they can be given those antivirals early in their illness, meaning they have to get tested soon, they have to be able to see a doctor early in their illness, that can make a big difference as well. And I think it's great that you have that option in Korea.
And finally, as a parent of two young kids myself, this is a question that's quite close to my heart. But what we're seeing is certain countries are really pushing very hard to give emergency use authorization for COVID-19 vaccinations for children under 12, sometimes younger than 5 years old. We have all the data in front of us. We know for a fact that there is a minuscule amount of very young children that get seriously ill due to COVID. We hear this argument that it's about protecting older members of society, but let's be honest, if you're a parent, you care more about your child than a random older stranger. Why do you think there's this push to vaccinate small kids against a virus which to them is almost never more serious than, say, a nasty cold.
Right, you're right that in children, in most children, if they were to get Omicron particularly, or in the past other strains of COVID, it tends to be a very mild infection. They'll be very, very unlucky if they get anything that's more serious than that. But there is a subset of children who can get more serious disease, maybe children with serious medical conditions that they're being treated for. If they were to get COVID, it could be more serious. And you mentioned there's a small number of severe cases. Those are disproportionately occurring in those most vulnerable children. So for the approval process, it's usually a two-step approval process. The first step is to get the approval from the government to use the vaccine in a particular age group. And then the second step is for an advisory body, maybe the CDC in Korea, to say who should get it. And they may well say it could be approved for all children 5 to 11, but in practice, we're only going to give it to the high-risk children. And that's what's being done, for example, in the United Kingdom. I think it makes sense to do it that way.
Professor Cowling, as always, thank you so much for sharing your insights. We'll hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.